All right. See, I've got the experts with me. We are in good hands. All right. So this session is now officially being recorded. Thank you, Krystal. And you guys are muted for the duration of the webinar because we've got so many folks on this tonight, and limit the background noise. If you leave your camera on, just remember that others can see you. Please submit questions in the chat box for everyone to see. Try not to direct comments to me, but Jessica and Krystal will be monitoring the questions and answering them as best they can. And if we have time at the end, we will answer any unanswered questions. After this session, you will receive an email inviting you to evaluate this session. Let us know how we did. Give us feedback. We're always wanting to do our best and provide things that you guys need. And quickly, within the next day or so, you'll receive a formal email from us with links to the slides and the recorded presentation. So the agenda. I'm going to introduce or reintroduce you to New Hampshire's Lakes and also New Hampshire Lakes, the organization that you've signed up to spend the next hour with. I'll give you an overview of the LakeSmart program. Then we'll talk about what it means to be LakeSmart. You'll get an idea whether or not you and your property are LakeSmart, and you'll find out how you can participate in the LakeSmart program this year. And just a quick disclaimer, there might be a quiz or two this evening, so do try to pay attention. I know I'm up against you just having dinner and maybe a glass of wine or something, so hopefully I'll keep your attention. So just to kick it off, thank you, Tom. That looks very nice. I can see that. So lakes and ponds, you guys already know this, are a huge part of New Hampshire's economy, quality of life, and our heritage. We have our rich heritage here. First quiz question, how many lakes and ponds are there in New Hampshire approximately? And just think to yourself, I see someone, 100, 1,000, 2,000, or 10,000?
I take it Jessica and I probably aren't allowed to participate.
No, you guys probably know this answer. Well, 1,000. There are about 1,000 lakes and ponds in New Hampshire. This is a lovely area of the lakes region, and there's something for everyone when it comes to our lakes and ponds, big and small, shallow, deep, hidden away, fast and fun, all sorts of different lakes out there. Our lakes truly are some of the cleanest and healthiest in the country. They're good for us. Clean and healthy lakes are good for us, especially during this challenging time. Getting some time to get out on the water is good for our soul, is good for our health. But the health and enjoyment of our lakes is threatened by invasive species, things like milfoil. Our lakes are threatened by polluted water that flows off the land or flows through the groundwater and into our lakes. And our lakes are threatened by changing weather patterns. We've had some kind of wacky weather the past couple of years here. Big rainstorms, periods of drought. The way we receive precipitation and our temperatures are changing, which is impacting our lakes as well, and our health and enjoyment of them. So, just like we need to take care of ourselves, the most irrational thing we can do is pretend that our lakes are going to take care of themselves. Just like we take good care of our health, we need to take care of the health of the lakes as well. So our story, New Hampshire Lakes, we're a statewide nonprofit organization founded in 1992, and we are the voice for all of New Hampshire's 1,000 lakes. And our mission, simply put, is to help keep our lakes clean and healthy now and in the future, because again, our lakes are so very important to us for so many reasons. As an organization, New Hampshire works with local groups, state legislature representatives, and individuals. We develop programs and policies really to inspire people to take action to keep our lakes clean and healthy. And that's why you guys are all here today. You're inspired. You want to find out what you can do to help keep our lakes clean and healthy, what you can do to keep the lake that you love or you live near clean and healthy. So a few years ago, we asked our members, our partners, and our friends, if New Hampshire Lakes, if we keep doing what we've been doing for the past 20 years, you know, working in the state legislature to influence rules and laws and policies, if we keep doing our popular lake host boat inspection program, if we keep doing family-friendly educational events, are our lakes going to be cleaner and healthier in 25 years from now than they are today? It was a serious question, but we wanted to know. And we heard no. We heard, hey, New Hampshire Lakes, you're doing a great job, but more needs to be done. Our lakes are under threat. More needs to be done to reduce nutrient pollution. So the nutrients that are coming off the landscape and making plants and algae and toxic algae grow. You may have heard about these things in the news or with your local community. We heard more needs to be done to encourage a culture of lake-friendly living. So we said, all right, we're up to the challenge. What are we going to do? How are we going to encourage a culture of lake-friendly living? Certainly someone else has done this in some other part of the country. So we reached out and researched a variety of programs and found that there are some great programs already being done in the country. We looked at programs in Michigan and Vermont, Wisconsin, and Maine. And we worked really closely with our friends in Maine, the Maine Lake Society. We're really intrigued by a program that they have, which they also call LakeSmart. So we met with them and they were so gracious and shared so much of their materials and advice and inspiration with us. And I think a few Maine folks might be in the call today. So thank you for all of your help. We couldn't be here tonight presenting without the help you've given us. So we took Maine's program and tweaked and tailored it a little bit to New Hampshire and launched this LakeSmart program last summer. So LakeSmart, a lake-friendly living program. So what is lake-friendly living? Let's start sort of at the basics here. So what is lake-friendly living? Is it this picture here on the left? Or is this picture here on the right? Well, most likely the picture on the right is a more lake-friendly property with lots of vegetation to soak up rain that falls from the sky, lots of vegetation to provide habitat for animals, to provide shade to the water. The picture here on the left may not be so lake-friendly. They have a green grassy lawn. Maybe they use too much fertilizer on it. They've got a driveway there and it looks like if it rains super hard, a bunch of water might just come off that driveway and come across the lawn, maybe pick up some, nutrients from fertilizer. So we would tend to say that the home on the right would be a more of a lake-friendly example, lake-friendly living. But as you'll see in this presentation, lake-friendly living isn't just about what your yard looks like, it's an important part, but not the only part. So really, lake-friendly living is a living in a way that minimizes your personal contribution to lake aging. So for some of you, lake aging, that might be a new concept for you. So yeah, did you know, just like us, just like people, lakes age over time. They fill in naturally with decayed plants, leaves, decayed algae and sediment. But the activities that us humans, that we do on the landscape, speeds up that lake aging process and also brings in some pollutants. So whether you live next to the lake or far from it, some of you may be familiar with the watershed concept. So whether you live next to the lake or far from it, what you do in your home, inside your home, and also on your property around your home will ultimately impact the lake, influencing its health. So as we live and we build on the landscape, pollutants from our activities make their way eventually into streams and rivers and groundwater and into our lakes. And this little comic here just shows a bunch of different types of ways we build and develop on the landscape and the different types of pollutants that could come into the lake and some of the problems that they can cause. And touched on earlier, too many nutrients makes plants grow faster, makes algae grow faster, makes potentially toxic algae grow faster, and also makes the lake more murky, and affects wildlife habitat area, affects places where fish try to spawn and things like that. So that was just a real quick sort of water quality chemistry lesson. We could do a whole webinar on Lake Ecology 101, and I think Krystal and Jessica maybe will do that after this series is over. But so we know that our lakes are under threat. We know, but what we've also known and we've found out, and I've been doing this work now for nearly 25 years, I have found that most people just really aren't aware. They don't know how their actions contribute to lake aging. They don't know how their actions affect the health of the lake. Thankfully, I've found, and Jessica and Krystal have found, that most people want to do the right thing. They want to learn how to keep the lakes they live near and the lakes they enjoy clean and healthy. So this is why we, again, researched the other programs going on through the country, worked closely with our friends in Maine, and developed this LakeSmart program. So what is exactly LakeSmart? We have a better idea now about what lake-friendly living is, but what's this program? So LakeSmart is an education, it's a property evaluation and also self-evaluation, and it's a recognition program. So it recognizes people who live in a lake-friendly way and who take actions to become more lake-friendly. This program is free. It's run by New Hampshire Lakes statewide in conjunction with local partners and local service providers. The program is free, and it's voluntary, and it's non-regulatory. What that means, this is why my friend is hanging out in the lake here. This is Krystal Lake in Enfield. He's all relaxed and calm. This is a stress-free program. No one is going to get in trouble in this program by participating. We're not going to turn you into the state if we work with you and find that you have something maybe that's not quite a good practice happening on your property. You know, we would let you know, hey, you know, this thing that's happening on your property is probably not allowed by state law, but we're not going to turn you in. So again, I find that most people just don't know what lake-friendly living is and don't know, you know, what they can and can't do. And so this is just a stress-free program. So LakeSmart, this is a picture here from our friends in Maine of a property they certified as LakeSmart in Maine. But LakeSmart helps keep our lakes clean and healthy. It helps protect wildlife habitat. It helps protect property owners' lakeside investment. It's good for your property. It's good for your financial situation. It's good for our taxes, our tax base, our communities. It helps support businesses and local economy. Again, through this program, you know, you may find some recommendations on how to become LakeSmart, and you may want to bring in a local service provider, a landscape company or something to help you. Or it may be something that you can do yourself. But again, healthy properties mean healthy lakes, which means healthy lake communities and healthy economies. The really cool thing about this program, LakeSmart, is it creates a conservation ethic across lake communities. And our friends in Maine and in other parts of the country have seen this. The social scientists tell us that once approximately 15% of a population partakes or adopts an action, they're setting a trend and other people are going to follow. So here on the screen, we have a picture on the left of a beautiful log cabin, you know, next to the lake with a expansive green lawn. And we're not against lawns in LakeSmart. You can have your lawn and be LakeSmart, but this might be a little too much lawn. And so this is on the left is not necessarily a lake-friendly way to live. The property on the right, you know, the house set back, some nice vegetation between the home and the water, natural vegetation, you know, that would tend to be, that's the norm we're trying to help encourage. But just so you know, your house doesn't have to look like that on the right to be LakeSmart. That's just one example of what a LakeSmart home might look like. But again, we're trying to create a conservation ethic and recognize property owners. So if your property, and you'll see later on, if you get recognized as LakeSmart, you're going to get a LakeSmart sign, an award that you can post, and others are going to see it and hopefully say, hey, how did Tom get that sign? I want to get that sign too. And we post signs in communities and say, and this sign here in the middle is an example of, hey, if you see this sign, you know, around the lake, this is what it means. And if you want to find out if you're LakeSmart, you know, here's how you can find out how to participate. So how can you participate? So there's two ways for a property owner to participate. And all participation starts with an online self-assessment. So where you registered for this webinar, there's also a link to take the LakeSmart self-assessment. It's a simple online quiz, takes about 30 minutes. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. And I know that some of you have already done it before this webinar. Gives you an idea of how lake-friendly you are. But at the end of the survey, you have an option to send in photos of your property, or you have the option to then invite a LakeSmart trained evaluator to your property. So we really prefer, the best way this program works is to actually then invite a LakeSmart trained evaluator to your property to then walk the property with you and take some additional observations and provide you with some initial recommendations right off the bat. And these LakeSmart trained evaluators are either from New Hampshire Lake staff, or they're from a local lake association that's decided that they want their volunteers trained to go out and survey, deliver this LakeSmart program and deliver it to their friends and neighbors. So I know we have some folks from Clough Pond on the call tonight. Clough Pond Association, Tom's waving, they've been trained to bring this to their community, and the Deering Lake Improvement Association is another community group that's been trained. We have 5 other groups that we hope to be able to train this summer at some of the bigger lakes. So LakeSmart works best when people learn from their friends and neighbors. So we hope ultimately that LakeSmart program is something that we are really providing training and technical support and guidance to local groups to go out in their own community to help encourage and recognize lake-friendly living. And we have found, and we're in conversations now about local groups adding this LakeSmart program to some of their existing programs already. So not to duplicate efforts, but to coordinate and combine and enhance efforts. And some of you may be familiar with the New Hampshire SOAK program, the Soak Up the Rain program, and working closely with them to help integrate the programs as well. So, you know, we're here to help provide a framework for property owners to get a comprehensive idea of what lake-friendly living is, and then help direct them to some more local programs that can help them implement recommendations. So it starts with the online assessment, and then follows up with some sort of site assessment, whether that's through photo submission or by a trained LakeSmart evaluator coming out from New Hampshire Lakes or a local group. But what are we really assessing? What are we really evaluating? Really, what this is all about is assessing or comparing property owners' actions and their practices year-round, practices that they do inside and outside the home, along and on the water. And we compare these to sort of standards of excellence. And the point of this slide is really to say, lake-friendly living is, of course, how runoff water comes off your property. Some of us know that as stormwater. That's very important to the health of the lake. But lake-friendly living includes how you manage your runoff water, but it includes many other things as well throughout your property, in your home, and throughout the year. So, of course, stormwater runoff, polluted runoff water management is very important, but sometimes that's the hardest thing for a homeowner, a property owner to tackle. So there are plenty of other things that maybe more simple things you could do first to become more lake friendly, and we'll go through that. So that's just sort of a real quick introduction to New Hampshire Lakes our lakes and how the LakeSmart program came along. And I'm just going to go forward here because I just checked the chat and it looks like folks are asking questions and Krystal's responding, so awesome job. All right, so the title of this webinar, Are You LakeSmart? So hopefully you're going to be able to start thinking now about, as we go through these examples of what we look for, you'll get some ideas. So the LakeSmart program, we're looking at 4 different sections of your property. And the first is the driveway and parking areas. And I should also say that this program applies to all properties, whether you live next to the lake or not, whether you live in an island or not. So if we went to an island property, you know, we may not evaluate their driveway and their parking areas, unless of course they have their own driveway and parking area, you know, somewhere on land, then we would, you know, on the mainland, we'd go there too. But here are some things we take a look at when we're looking at driveways and parking areas. One of the first things you are asked this in your assessment, and also we take a look at it when we are, you know, on site, are the driveway and parking areas minimized? You know, do you have enough parking and driveway that suits your needs, but you know, it's not excessive? And the reason that we focus on minimizing driveways and parking areas is because a driveway or a parking area is a very compacted, dense surface. So, you know, think about it. If it rains on a driveway, you know, where does that rainwater go? It's probably not going to soak into the driveway. It's going to run off, maybe erode, pick up, wash away some soil, gravel, and wash that into a wetland or into a stream and maybe ultimately the lake. So the more we can not compact the soil, so squish it down, the better we'll be able to help rain soak into the ground. So one again of the standards is, you know, again, having driveway and parking areas that suit your needs but aren't excessive. Another standard of excellence is that water that comes off of driveways and parking areas is diverted into areas where it can soak into the ground. So maybe we take a look at, you know, what does the vegetation look like along a driveway? Are there areas, are there plants, healthy plants where the water can, you know, shut off the driveway and get soaked up by plants, that sort of thing. And then talking about LakeSmart being year round, in New Hampshire, right, we get a lot of snow and ice, and we need to deal with that snow and ice so that we can, you know, safely travel and walk around our properties. So a lake-friendly living standard of excellence is that, you know, to minimize the use of de-icing products, whether that's, you know, salt, road salt, sand, gravel, kitty litter, minimize de-icing products, but use, you know, enough that provide for safe passage. Some of you may be familiar with a program called the New Hampshire Green Snow Program, and this is a program in which roadway de-icing contractors are certified in how to use less chemicals, less abrasives, while still maintaining safe travel on our roadways and parking areas. So a lake-friendly living tip is to hire a green snow pro to plow or maintain your driveway. You know, what I didn't mention also obviously is winter de-icing products often have road salt in them, and road salt, when it gets washed into the lake, is toxic to aquatic life. So driveways and parking areas, that's a main focus of the program. Another section of the property is that we ask you questions about and do some on-site observations is about your structures and your on-site wastewater treatment systems. So a standard of excellence here is that the wastewater treatment system is regularly maintained, and there's a few caveats here. And first of all, most, not all, but a lot of our lakeside properties and a lot of our properties in general in New Hampshire are not served by municipal sewering. A lot of us are on septic systems. A common question me, Krystal, and Jessica get is, well, how often should my septic system be pumped? And the answer is, it depends. It depends on what type of system you have and how old it is, and how many bedrooms are used that it services, how many people it services. So it depends. But a standard of excellence is to have a relationship with a certified inspector and pumper that knows and understands your system and can recommend a maintenance, a pump out schedule that makes sense for your system. So that's a standard of excellence. Occasionally we'll get to a home or a property and we'll ask them about the septic system, and they'll say, oh, it's over there. If you don't know where your septic system is, you don't know what type it is or the last time it's been maintained, chances are that part of your living is not lake friendly, and that would be something that we would recommend that you take a look at. Another standard of excellence, again, things that you do in your home, using phosphate-free cleaning products. Again, phosphorus being that nutrient that makes plants and algae grow. And when you go to the store, you can take a look at the labels on products, and it'll let you know if there's phosphorus or not. Salt-free, some of us use water softeners, so we recommend using salt-free water softeners, and this is something that the Department of Environmental Services is encouraging us to really promote. Again, salt, when it gets into our groundwater and eventually into our lakes, is toxic to aquatic life. Another standard of excellence here, when we walk around your structures while we're out doing a site visit, and we take a look at, how is the rain that's coming out, the rainwater and the snowmelt when it comes off of the buildings on your property? Is it soaking into the ground nearby, or is it running off, running downhill, picking up speed and washing away a bunch of soil, into the lake that might have phosphorus again, that would make the plants and algae grow. So we take a look at that as well. And in the self-assessment, you answer some questions about that as well. So those are some, some examples of what it means to live in a lake-friendly way here. Section 3 would be, in your self-assessment and in the on-site or the photo evaluation, we're going to take a look at your yard and your recreation areas and your footpaths. And a standard of excellence is that your lawn area is minimized. Again, we are not saying you can't have a lawn, but we're saying, if you want a lawn, you can try to minimize it. Does the size of your lawn suit how you recreate? Again, lawn, while it is vegetation, becomes compacted, or the soil becomes squished together really quickly, and it's not able to hold water, and so lawns very quickly become almost impervious, meaning they don't act as a sponge. They let all that runoff water just shed off of them and into the lake. So again, we're not against lawns. We just say there's you take a look at the size of your lawn, and is it more than you need? And if it is more than you need, consider establishing, an inexpensive way to deal with that is just to stop mowing certain parts of it and let it naturally evolve into more of a meadow with wildflowers coming in, and that provides really great insect habitat. And so another best practice is to minimize or just not even use fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides on your lawn and your gardens. These are chemicals, and once they get washed into the lake, they can be toxic to the aquatic life. Another standard of excellence is that you have footpaths designated throughout the property, directing people where you want them to walk, how they can access different areas, how they can access the shoreline. We would prefer that people don't walk willy-nilly all over the property, compacting the soil everywhere. Because again, compacted soil is what we're trying to avoid. Compacted soil doesn't soak up rainwater or snowmelt very well. And again, adds more water coming off of the property. So identify footpaths, but minimize them, and make sure that they're stable and curved. Make sure that they're not just, a straight shot to the lake, funneling runoff water and eroded soil down the hill and into the lake. And as I touched on earlier too, identify areas on your property where you want people to hang out, where you want people to sit by the fire, where you want people to, play on a play structure. And again, try to direct them to those areas via paths, and then leave other areas of your property, untouched, more in a natural, less used way, so that again, those other areas can soak up the rainwater and provide a good wildlife habitat. And I will say, as you see here, 2 of these pictures are from our partners at Balanoff Landscape, and they are truly the landscape experts, and they'll be presenting next Thursday at this time, giving you some tips about getting the landscape that you'll love, but while also keeping the lake clean and healthy. So another section, this 4th section we take a look at in your self-evaluation, and also through the photo evaluation or the in-person site visit, is the shoreline and the water access. And again, just to let you know, this program can be done on properties that aren't along the water. Because all properties, again, whether you're next to the water or a mile up the hill, eventually affect the health of our lakes. But for a property that has shoreline access, so has water, along its boundary, we take a look, of course, to see a standard of excellence is that there is a healthy and diverse strip of vegetation along the entire shoreline. This is, many of you may already know, this is generally referred to as a vegetated buffer. That's really the last line of defense on the property from any runoff water or pollution that's coming off the property. And so that vegetated buffer helps to, again, slow that down and soak up that water. And also the plants, again, provide some shading to your property, provide some shading to the water, and provide some beneficial wildlife habitat. The other thing is, for those of you out in the audience that have a Canada goose problem, or a duck or a geese problem on your property, a healthy and diverse strip of vegetation along the entire shoreline that's about 3 feet tall will help to prevent Canada geese in particular from visiting your property and becoming the nuisance that they can be. Another standard of excellence is that paths along your property that lead to the water. We all want to get to the water, right? But again, having a path, letting people know, hey, this is how you access the water, and making sure that that path is stable, so it's not, crumbling away every time it rains. It's not getting washed into the lake. Make sure that path is stable. This picture in the middle is a really great example of what's called infiltration steps. It's 2x4s with crushed gravel in between, leading down the slope. It's, some would say that's attractive. It's also safe, provides for stable footing, and it the gravel helps to soak up any water. The water soaks through the gravel and into the ground. So it helps to reduce runoff water. So that's a really great example. And then also along the shoreline, I know a lot of us have various different vessels, boats, craft, canoes, kayaks, paddle boards. This is a really simple way to be lake friendly. Instead of just storing those things on the ground where they're covering up the ground, not letting water sink into the ground, they're compacting the soil. Raise them up. Have build a boat rack, or could be a great project for your family some weekend to get the kids or the grandkids out there and build a boat rack and put those craft just up off the ground, so the vegetation can still grow underneath, and so the vegetation doesn't get compacted. So again, that's a really easy, as I mentioned earlier, there are some really easy things that you can do to help your lake become more lake friendly. And we went to a number of properties last summer, and this was, building a boat rack was something that a lot of property owners said, hey, that's really cool. I never thought of that. I can totally do that. All right. So also, lake-friendly living, it's not only what you do, on your property, in your home, and along the water. It's what you do in the water too. So a standard of excellence is that you leave the shallow water, leave this area natural. You know, you're not going in there and raking it. And every time we rake up the lake, we're suspending, mixing sediment into the water, which mixes phosphorus into the water, which can fuel more algae and toxic algae blooms. So we leave the natural area, the shallow water area natural. Of course, if you happen to live on a lake where it is infested with an invasive plant, like maybe milfoil, you would be working, hopefully your local municipality or lake association would be working with the state of New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services on a management plan to pull that invasive plant out of the water. But in general, leaving the shallow water area natural is the best, most lake-friendly living thing you can do. Ducks, geese, and wildlife are not fed. So that's a standard of excellence for lake-friendly living. While these guys are so cute, there's plenty of food out there, and the food that we might want to give them, you know, bread, it's really not healthy for them. And, you know, feeding the ducks and the geese are going to make them continue to come back to your place, and then often leads to conflicts with the geese when they get on your yard and dirty your yard. So a standard of excellence is, you know, look at them, keep your distance, and not feed them, and enjoy them. And as we mentioned, lake-friendly living is year-round. So during the winter, a standard of excellence is if you have a dock, a permanent structure, and you're trying to keep it free from ice damage, you really want to disconnect it from the ice sheet. So we use what's called bubblers or aerators in New Hampshire. And a lake-friendly living best practice is to have a bubbler or an aerator, you know, on a timer and on a thermostat, so that it's not running full bore the whole time, because you just want to open up enough water, again, to disconnect the dock from the ice sheet. You don't need to open up, you know, huge areas of the lake. That's really not lake friendly, because what's happening is during the winter, our lakes need to rest. They need the ice. Anytime we open up the ice, we're letting in more sunlight into the lake, which is helping the plants and the algae and potentially toxic algae to grow in the lake. So again, a best practice, and this is pretty simple, my parents just did it, is, you know, putting your dock, your bubbler on a timer and on a thermostat, and usually your local hardware store can help you, or we have several marine contractors in the state that can help you as well with that. So shoreline and water access is in the water too, not so just along the water and in the water. And these are some examples of if you boat and you use a motorboat, a lake-friendly living practice is to use a fuel-efficient motor. So if you need to upgrade your boat, we consider recommend that you go to the marine contractors and see what they have available in the more fuel-efficient, lower emissions. Of course, if you're a boater, and if you have any experience with us as an organization, you've heard that there are some pretty simple steps that boaters can take to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. Whether you're a motorboat or a paddler, we recommend that people clean between water bodies, clean, drain, and dry their boats, trailers, and gears, so we're not transporting any fragments of invasive plants or animals or any water droplets, essentially, that might be harboring invasive animal larvae. So again, and the other thing is, if you do fish, use lead-free fishing tackle. Lead is a pollutant that unfortunately is the inadvertent ingestion of loons ingesting lead fishing tackle is the primary cause of mortality of loons in New Hampshire. So again, when I said earlier, lake-friendly living, stormwater runoff, managing the polluted water that comes off of your property is hugely important, but these are some other examples of also very important actions you can take to live in a more lake-friendly way and keep the lake ecosystem as a whole more healthy. So I've been talking a lot, but just a quick quiz here. The keys to being lake friendly include, and I'll give you a minute or two, based on what we just talked about, one of the key principles of lake friendly living is to minimize the use of products that pollute. So we talked about minimizing the amount of phosphorus that you use in your home, using phosphorus-free products. Limiting or not even using fertilizer, not using lead tackle. So minimizing the use of products that pollutes. Leaving natural areas natural. Again, we talked about, on your property, identifying places where you want people to walk, where you want people to hang out, so that other areas can remain natural and spongy and soak up the rain. Stabilizing surfaces. So we talked about, making sure that your property has vegetation on it, or has, areas where the water can soak into the ground, and, we don't have just, bare soil that's unstable and gets washed away. And diverting runoff water. We talked about driveways and parking areas and walkways, areas where water doesn't soak into the ground, making sure that we divert or direct that water into an area where it can soak into the ground and get cleaned up naturally by the plants in the soil. And soaking up runoff water. Again, runoff water being one of the hugely key critical things to lake-friendly living. So those are just some general principles that we talked about. So the LakeSmart Award. So again, the LakeSmart program, it's an education, evaluation and recognition program. Again, you start with a self-assessment survey online, and then you can send in photos of your property, or a trained LakeSmart evaluator from New Hampshire Lakes, or the locally trained group can come out to your property and take a look and evaluates different areas. And generally speaking, in each of those 3 or 4 sections, depending on if you live along the water or not, or if you live on an island or not, generally speaking, if you score about 70% of the total possible points in each section, a property owner is going to achieve the LakeSmart Award. And this is one of our first LakeSmart Award winners, Shauna, and I believe she is on the call tonight. Hi, Shauna. And really, again, the key to this program is recognition and encouraging others. So Shauna and others who got the LakeSmart Award are putting this on posting their sign on their property, and they're encouraging their friends and neighbors to find out what LakeSmart is and find out if they're LakeSmart. And just today I had an email exchange with Shauna, and she wanted to know how many people received the LakeSmart Award last year, and she's going to try to create a friendly competition up in her community around the lake this summer to see how many more folks can get it. So we thank you, Shauna, for all you're doing. So again, a recognition. Some property owners are going to receive the LakeSmart Award on their very first evaluation. But we know that no property is ever going to be 100% lake friendly. Through this LakeSmart program, all property owners receive a confidential summary report with lake friendly living recommendations and links to different resources where you can find out more about implementing improvements. And the other thing we'll do is where we have a local partner, a service provider, whether it's a landscaper or a septic system contractor or a marine contractor, we'll put you in contact with local service providers or even a local lake association that might be able to help you implement some of these improvements or recommendations. In our reports, we include some graphics to give you an idea of some upgrades, like friendly living upgrades you can make. So this is the picture here on the left looks like a fairly lake-friendly property, but there's again no property is completely 100% lake-friendly. And even on this property, which did receive the LakeSmart Award, we had Krystal here had some really great recommendations on how they could close up, vegetate that area that was sort of funneling runoff water off of their walkway and down to their boat access. So I think we'd all agree that the picture on the right is pretty attractive. Provides some nice wildlife habitat there, and you'll see a kind of a cool little kayak rack in the background there too, again getting those boats off the ground. So these are the types of graphics we include with our reports. This is a graphic that Jessica did on the left. Difficult site, really compacted soil with sort of uneven access to the shoreline, and Jessica suggested some infiltration steps, again those gravel areas with timbers in between, providing safe, stable access and also slowing down runoff. She added some native vegetation to the slide and then some stepping stones there to direct people to the dock. Let's see what else we've got here. And here's another great mock-up, I think also by Jessica. Here on the left, we have a fairly steep compacted slope, pretty typical for New Hampshire, a pine area, piney understory here. And on the right, again, we proposed putting in a bunch of gravel, again, sort of retrofitting some infiltration steps here. To, again, that gravel will help the runoff, the rain and the runoff soak into the ground, and added some very attractive native vegetation. Again, vegetation having roots to hold the soil in place, soak up the water, and also provide some nice wildlife habitat areas as well. So again, and finally, this was a really difficult site here. On the left here, we came to this property a summer after they had a microburst storm, and they lost 18 big trees on their property. And because they had all these trees for such a long time, they didn't have very much understory, so low growing vegetation. But once those trees got wiped out, their shoreline was very exposed. So Krystal worked on a really nice proposed upgrade here on the right. Again, providing a nice attractive stepping stone path, pretty inexpensive, but a path to direct people, where to walk, and then also added in some really nice, beautiful vegetated pocket gardens to add some areas where water can soak in, and again, add some nice wildlife habitat there. So again, if a property owner doesn't initially achieve LakeSmart status, on their first evaluation, they can make improvements. We suggest improvements. They can make improvements and they can participate in the evaluation again. And, they may become LakeSmart on their second or third or try. So now that you've got an idea of what lake-friendly living is, the areas that we look at for lake-friendly living, now it's time for you to think about, and I'm sure many of you have been already thinking this throughout the presentation, are you LakeSmart? So we're offering you the opportunity here to find out if you're LakeSmart. And again, the first step is just to take the online self-assessment. I can take it in the comfort of your own home, and you will, the website where you can access the survey is down here in the corner, but you're in the follow-up materials you'll receive from us. I think you'll receive it tomorrow morning in an email. You'll have a direct link to this self-assessment. So take the self-assessment. Again, it's pretty simple, maybe 30 minutes, mostly yes or no or true or false questions. But then during that assessment, you can then opt to send in photos of specific areas of your site for a trained evaluator to take a look at, or you can invite an evaluator to come to your property. And I apologize, this is a pretty lame attempt at putting a mask on an inspector, but Krystal, Jessica, and I, and the rest of the New Hampshire Lakes team, we're really looking forward to, once the stay-at-home order is lifted, we'll be able to start visiting properties, and our local partners will be able to start visiting properties too. We will be wearing masks and maintaining physical distancing, of course. But I encourage you all to take the self-assessment. It's the first step in becoming more lake-friendly, and just by taking the self-assessment, you're going to learn a whole lot more than I was able to convey in the past 50 minutes. And then again, you'll have the opportunity to have an evaluation again, either through photos or by inviting one of us. So just in wrap up, and then we'll get to some questions here. Thank you for your time, and I encourage you, by living in a lake-friendly way and encouraging others to do so, our lakes are going to be cleaner and healthier for all of us to enjoy today and in the future. And I do hope that you'll jump in and help us make lake-friendly living the norm in New Hampshire. New Hampshire Lake staff, me, Krystal, and Jessica, and our lake associations can't do it without folks like you stepping up and taking the initiative, becoming LakeSmart, posting that sign, talking to your friends and neighbors, encouraging others to become LakeSmart as well. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jessica and Krystal to see if there are any questions that came in, or anything that Krystal or Jessica, anything that you want to add that I didn't mention tonight.
Sure, Andrea, your presentation was excellent, and we had some really good questions in the chat box, which we tried to respond to. But we have one question that I think you and only you can handle, which is, what do you do? How do you deal with runoff at a boat launch?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, unfortunately, right, if we go to a boat launch, a lot of our boat launches are essentially funnels, right? They're made to be funnels to get our lakes, boats onto our lakes. But yeah, that is a challenge. And one of the phases that eventually we hope we will be able to include in this LakeSmart program is a specific part focused right on boat launches. So we're not there yet, but I would say in the interim, if you do have a boat launch erosion issue, feel free to reach out to us. And at this point, we can try to help figure out who owns the boat launch. We can take a visit to the launch and provide some recommendations. But again, ultimately, this program will expand to hopefully municipal properties and other properties. So great question.
Well, in terms of questions, I think that, the presentation was relatively comprehensive because we didn't get that many questions. We got we got one question about, what kind of material is better, salt or sand around the lake. Jessica and I tried to answer that. Mm-hmm. We got a question about what to do if you see your neighbor bringing in sand or clear cutting. Mm-hmm. And we talked about some steps to take in that instance to obviously try and talk to your neighbor first about what the requirements are for legally bringing in sand and how to make sure you're following the requirements for cutting in the shoreland area as well. So hopefully we answered their questions. But we don't have that many more. So I see Winston has his hand up. So Winston, if you have a question, please let us know. Here, hold on. Winston, I'm going to unmute you so we can hear you. Go ahead, ask your question.
That's a good beginning. Thank you. I want to thank Andrea for a very comprehensive presentation. And I also want to apologize for having gotten in a few minutes late.
Everybody noticed, Winston. Everybody noticed that you were late.
Absolutely. My question is, to what extent do the norms and standards of town ordinances or legislative 483B figure into the determinations of made with regard to LakeSmart?
Yeah, great question, Winston. For those of you who aren't familiar, I believe Winston's referring to our Shoreland Water Quality Protection Act, which has some pretty specific standards about the use of fertilizer near the water, you know, how much impervious surface, so how many hard surfaces you can have near the lake. I will say that, Winston, when we develop these standards of excellence, the basics of the Shoreline Protection Act were you know, incorporated into this. So, you know, we're very, you know, fertilizer, things like that. And also you'll see when you take the self-assessment that we ask folks about sand. That's a big thing, you know. Are people applying sand to a beach area? And if they are they applying it? The application of sand is allowable. It just, there's certain permits that you need to get in a timeline. So we do, you know, ask about that, and we ask about the different structures. I think the bottom line is that, again, no one's going to get in trouble for this program, but when a LakeSmart evaluator goes to a property, or when someone answers a question in a certain way, if we suspect that, you know, there might be a compliance issue, we're going to let that property owner know, and we are not able to certify or recognize our property as LakeSmart if we believe that there's some sort of lack of compliance with one of the, you know, policy, state rules or laws happening. So we would advise, and we had a situation last year where the property looked wonderful, but then they just didn't know about not being able to apply sand without a permit. And so we said, you know, until you have that situation in compliance, we can't recognize you as LakeSmart. So I hope that answers your question. If not, we can talk about that more offline.
And if I can just hop in there for a second, Andrea,
Absolutely.
I think it's important to say that, you know, you can have a man-made sandy beach and, you know, enjoy that as a part of the LakeSmart program, but there are certainly best management practices that must be considered. And so often we'll see sandy beaches that are having erosion issues, and people are bringing in sand onto that beach, and then in a significant rainstorm, it's just washing into the lake and they're just replacing it. So through the LakeSmart program, it's our goal to help property owners understand how to continue enjoying their property and just bring it to a heightened level of responsibility. So we might encourage them to introduce a low-growing vegetated buffer on that sandy beach, so that all of that sand isn't just washing into the water. Mm-hmm. Sort of the same thing with having a green lawn. We don't want people to feel like they can't have a lawn as a part of the LakeSmart program, but there are responsible measures that can be taken to increase the LakeSmart value of their property with that lawn intact.
Awesome. Let's see.
Andrea, I spotted a question about the local fire department flushing out their hydrants to ensure that they aren't clogged, and a question about if that could potentially contribute aquatic invasive species to the nearby water bodies. Would you like to tackle that question?
That's a great question, and that's a question that we get. You know, we get that periodically. And I think that, you know, thank you, first of all, for raising that question. I know sometimes it's alarming to see that practice happening. There is the potential for the spread of, you know, fragments or of invasive species, but it is unlikely. And throughout my career, there's been a few times where a group has contacted us about that, and we've reached out to the fire department just to say, hey, by the way, you know, are you aware of invasive species in the spread? And more often than not, we've had the fire department say, oh yeah, we totally understand, and we make sure to do a really good job rinsing off our hoses. So it is, of course, you know, it is a concern, but I don't think it's a huge concern. But again, feel free to reach out to us directly at New Hampshire Lakes, and we can help start that conversation with your local fire department if they're not aware about invasive species.
Very good. Let's see, a couple more comments coming in. There there are questions about fireworks. We did address fireworks in the chat box, but maybe you can expand upon them. Obviously, we talked about how, you know, having one large firework display is better than 100 firework displays all over the lake.
Yeah.
And we also talked about how having a firework display over land in an area where those heavy metals and debris aren't going to wash into the lake is important. But do you have anything else to add about fireworks and what people can do in their communities to encourage better practices or protect
Sure.
names?
Sure. A great question. And again, that, you know, obviously is a question that we get fairly commonly. And it is, and maybe you addressed this already, it is a question that we ask in the LakeSmart self-assessment. Do you personally light fireworks over the lake? You know, the textbook answer is, you know, lighting off fireworks is not the most lake-friendly thing you can do. We also know that it is part of the culture, you know, in New Hampshire, around many of our lakes. And so we do encourage groups, and I'm repeating what Krystal and Jessica have already told you, is, you know, we encourage groups to, you know, do one event rather than, you know, multiple events throughout the summer. Some of you may be from municipalities where municipalities have put in some sort of fireworks ordinance, you know, so limiting or prohibiting fireworks. And I would say that if you're interested in that for your community, you can certainly reach out to us and we can provide you with some examples that we know of in other communities where they've done that. But to be honest, I know that even in communities where they do have some sort of ordinance or restriction on fireworks, it's pretty hard to enforce. So
certainly, and I'm going to drop a fact sheet from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services on fireworks and New Hampshire lakes in the chat box. So
nice.
If anybody's interested in that, you can find it there.
I put that in there, Krystal.
Oh, you already got it? Oh, you're so
See,
good.
this team,
So
they're
good.
experts.
Put it again, though.
Well, we are just over 8 o'clock here, and this is wonderful to see all of the questions. And Krystal and Jessica are rock stars for answering, you know, as many of these as they could. Krystal and Jessica, any last questions you think we should answer before we sign off and let folks go to bed?
It is kind of late. I think that it's probably about 1 o'clock. So I think that we're good over here. I think that we did a baseline address of people's questions, but if you have additional questions, I guess, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email Andrea or Jessica or I to go in more detail, and we'd be happy to help. And I certainly hope that people, if you haven't already, will take the LakeSmart self-assessment so that you can get a better idea of how LakeSmart your property is.
Awesome. Well, I do hope that we'll see you and your friends and your Lake Association cohorts for our next session next Thursday evening. And again, we'll have the experts from Balanoff Landscape talk to you about landscaping next to the lake. So again, you will receive an evaluation hopefully this evening, letting us know, you can let us know how we did. And again, tomorrow morning, you should receive an email from us with links to the slideshow, the recording, and links to how to sign up for the additional upcoming webinars. So thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And we're very much looking forward to the time where we can get out and meet with you all on your property.
Andrea, there's just a comment in the chat box that I'd love to share with you. Alice says, thank you. This is basic enough for this city gal to understand, but information that I sure needed. Thank you for caring about the lakes.
Oh, that's awesome. Very good. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing here and
Thomas cheersing.
Cool.
Good night, everybody. It was so nice to
night.
see everybody. Andrea, great job. It was so informative.
Thank you for
Yes.
all of your help, Krystal and Jessica.
Good job, Andrea. It's awesome.
Get some sleep, and I'll talk to you guys sometime soon. Sleep? What's
What's
sleep?
that?